without further ado, let's get stuck in here, Hastings, and we'll go to the Group 1, the Windsor Park Plate, 1,600 metres, second leg. Stephen, run us through how this market looks. No surprise who our favourite is here.
Yeah, Callsign Mav looking to go back-to-back from the first leg to the second leg. Open 1.9 when betting commenced on Wednesday, Thaddeus. It was backed into 1.8 around about 5-10 minutes into trading with a little bit of smart money around the favourite in Callsign Mav. Spring Tide, $4.20 holds the call there in that second line. Gino Severini, $5.50 out to 7. Pre-defer, here's a shift. Open double figures 10, trading 9. Then there's a little bit of a gap. Harleq 15 out to 21 early doors. Siracusa 18, sharing that same quote as Harleq, now trading at 21. P Arena 26 out to 31. Lanacord 31 out to 41. Tappies 1, Manoa Kia, Ratani and Katy Perry 51 each of 4, the rankies. So there's a couple of talking points. Callsign Mav 190 into 180, holds around about 30% of the hold currently, and pre-defer being a bit of a firmer in the first 24, 36 hours, 10 into 9.
Yeah, okay, BP. He just looks a bulletproof sort of bet. Callsign Mav. He hasn't got too many question marks, but you might suggest there are just a couple lingering around his rivals in this race. He looks a shot's eye here. Callsign Mav, you'd have to suggest.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Thad. There is more question marks around his opposition as opposed to Callsign Mav. He has got that tactical speed where he can put himself in the right place in the run. Middle barrier draw of 7 is niggly over the 1,600 metres, but if he is a horse who jumps and puts himself there, he can overcome that very quickly. He's been able to operate at the distance at this venue, of course, with a very good third in this race last year behind Melody Bell and Avantage. He's a bona fide Group 1 horse. It looked like he was going to lose that Group 1 in the Tarzino, but he found a way to win it. Of course, that horse that was diving at him was Spring Tide, but this is a different race again, isn't it? More distance, won't be as wet, the track condition. $1.90, $1.80. It just seems to be a horse that you can run through multis, and he's hard to tip against. He really is hard to tip against in this race. I think runners like Pre-Defer, Springtide, Gino Severini, of course they do. They have their chances. They do have their chances in this race on the weekend. But Pre-Defer is a hard horse to follow, but he does get to a distance that will be suitable for him. He was backed strongly in that race 2 weeks ago in Tarzino, and he finished into 7th position. He was very good in the Foxbridge. Springtide, with everything we've seen with Springtide, of course, he has to be in calculation somewhere with how he ran in that race. So I just keep coming back to Callsign Mav and trying to work out how to get the first 4.
Exactly. Not a bad call. Steve, what about the speed in the race? Pop's touched on the barrier 7 from that tricky-ish start there at the mile at Hawke's Bay. Has he got anything that's going to challenge him in the lead, or how's this map play out?
It looks fairly straightforward. I thought that was fairly straightforward in terms of map when it came to Tarzino, but there was a little bit of speed underneath him around the frontman and Supreme Heights, both those runners not in the second leg. So, look, I think he gets to the lead easy enough from barrier 7. It can be, as BP alluded, a tricky start at the mile at Hastings, but it's a tricky one. I don't see too much in terms of an obvious candidate which might take on Callsign Mav in the first furlong or two over the 1,600. But look, I think if he gets to the lead by default, look, I don't think Jonathan will want to make it a sit and sprint affair, because that just takes his biggest asset away in Callsign Mav's high cruising speed. And we've seen that from almost day dot around this horse. Even when he was a progressive 3-year-old, he had that high cruising speed. So he'll look to go even tempo for the first maybe 600 metres. And then from the 1,000 metre mark, I think Jonathan will just want to increase the splits and make it a truly run event in terms of the last 8-6-4-2 closing splits. So, but overall, I think the first furlong or two, I just can't see too much pressure underneath Callsign Mav to really challenge that number 1 in terms of the map.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Paul, are you brave enough or stupid enough to take on John Barry here with Callsign Mav at the Bay? I mean, it seems like a death wish if you were going to.
It sounds like the way the boys are talking that we haven't found the bottom of the market either when it comes to Callsign Mav and his price, which is around $1.80 right now. BP did mention he was third behind the 2 queens of Tiaco last year in Melody Bell and Avantage. he was a long neck nose third behind those two. So he really doesn't have that sort of competition against him this time round. The one I did like outside of Callsign Mav was Prix Fur. It just looks ready to pounce. I thought they were encouraging runs in the Foxbridge and the Tarzino. He just can't get a draw. He was, I think he was drawn 13th in this race last year. He's out at the 10 barrier this time as well. But I think if Troy can get him around across, fairly enough without having to spend too much, I think he's got enough speed in him to give Callsign Mav a wee bit of a go. He had the fastest last 800 and 600 sectionals in this race last year. And I think if he can just get across without having to spend too much gas early on, I think he's the main danger to Callsign Mav. Springtide, of course, the track just seems to be getting a wee bit too firm for Springtide. So, and I think we were getting around $20 for Springtide 2 weeks ago in the Tarzino. Of course, that was with the Avantage in the market, but we're only getting around the $4.50 mark this time. So I can't have Springtide. So yeah, Callsign Mav on top. But if there is a danger, I'd say Prix Fur.
What do you make of Prix Fur, BP? Look, the resuming run was encouraging, got people fired up that he could run a race in that first leg. And what do you make of that run? I guess is my question.
He just got in a sticky spot, didn't he? He just got, I'm sure, a lot further back than maybe it was anticipated, especially with the amount of money that came for him. So he just found himself in a position that was, I'm sure, a pair or three further back than where they were looking for, and that just made it difficult for him to be winning the race with how things panned out with where the winner was, of course, that being Callsign Mav. So I believe he has a chance in the race, most certainly, because of his Group 1 1600 meter form. He has to say that he can be a player on that and a big improver. I sort of look at Gino Severini, where he's run 2 big races this season so far also, and they've both been, or the first run especially, the Foxbridge run where he ran second. It was almost a huge surprise with how he ran, but he trialled well enough leading up to that. He can run over so many different distances, Gino Severini. He's also been getting back in those races from barriers 12 and 13. He can take a position. We've spoken about Gino a lot on this podcast with how he has enough technical speed where he can position up. He was drawn in barrier number 5. He could be in the front half of the field as opposed to the back half of the field that he's been in the last 2 starts. For mine, that makes him a really big top 3, top 4 player. And the other horse I don't want to leave out is Harleq. Harleq's got Group 1 form over 1600 metres, has run second in the 2000 Guineas, has run second in the Levin Classic as a 3-year-old over 1600 metres. He'll get a firm deck to bounce off. That is his go in life, not the surface that we saw on a slow 8 at Hawke's Bay. If he gets better footing and can be a little bit closer to them, he is a danger.
We're not seeing anything down the page here, Pops. I mean, it's got a bit of a tail, dare I say it. Hard to sort of tip anything at plus $20 plus in this one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is unfortunate how the race has fallen away, and it's fallen away with no Dragon Leap, no Catalyst, and obviously no Avantage. When you start losing those sort of horses, you're losing genuine Group 1 horses, aren't you? And unfortunately, that's what has happened to the field. And look, we see some horses that they get an opportunity in a Group 1 that maybe they wouldn't normally. Good on the connections for having a shot. I mean, the race is there to have a go at, and they're having a throw at the stumps. But that could be the case in 2 weeks' time, too, for the Livermore Classic. That will be a different race again when we see Sauvignon Blanc and those sort of horses take their place in the Livermore Classic in a couple of weeks with more distance. I mean, there is a 1600 metre open race at Te Rapa, for instance, where about 4 or 5 of those horses would be not out of place in this race. For whatever reason, they've decided to stay closer to home and work their way towards Hawke's Bay for the Livermore Classic. But we've heard a lot of trainers talk about it is difficult to be able to go to Hawke's Bay 3 times backwards and forwards with only just that 2-week gap, which can take a lot more out of horses than what you'd really understand. So I think you've got to take that point on board as well.
Yeah, okay, we'll stay with you, BP. Give us a top 4 in this year's Windsor Park.
I'll go with Callsign Mav, quite clearly on top. In front of Gino Severini, I just thought he might be a good sneaky hope of running into the money. Prix Fur, Springtide and Harleq is where I'm sort of bouncing. Springtide, no 1600 meter form, and obviously on the better track, but he just ran so well last time out. So just maybe he's in the right space to run a race. So I'll go 1, 3, 2, 4 as my numbers, but yeah, Harleq's definite in my first 4 anyway.
Yeah, okay, 4/5. We're going with BP. Paul, what are you thinking here in this year's Windsor Park, mate? Have you got 4 selections for us?
Not too different from BP. Callsign Mav on top. I like Predefer in behind, and then Harleq and Syracusa.
Syracusa. Okay, nice. Be an improver. Steve, anything you want to add before we move on to the Guineas around this year's Group 1 over the mile?
Well, interesting, BP brought up around the 1600 metres for Springtide. He's yet to be tried at the mile. He did run home as fast as last 8:6:42 in the Group 1 on the first day. So, but that doesn't always transition into getting over more ground when you're closing the best sectionals in a certain race. But I went back into the pedigree. The Dam Spring Fever, she went up to 1200 metres. Full sister to Springtide and Spring Bouquet went up to 1400 twice. But you have to go back to the second dam to find a horse that's performed or winning form over 1600 metres. But look, the stable pretty keen that the horse can get to 1600 and operate on a better track. So I don't want to knock it totally around Springtide. And yeah, just going back to the Tarzino and how the race rated in terms of a winning performance and Callsign Mav, it was right on the mark to Group 1 standard. So I don't think 90% of these horses can run up to a Group 1 standard. So all the fave needs to do is just replicate what he did on the first day, and he'll be winning again in my eye. But and also Syracusa. I mean, you go back to Syracusa last preparation, and I see Paul Mawadi's got it in his top 3 or 4. Its PPs have been at 1600. One of them was winning the Karaka Classic, being a sub winner in the Easter Handicap and demonetisation, and then also ran second the Japan Trophy, and third happened to be Gino Severini. So you can work a little bit of form reference around Gino Severini and Syracusa. But pretty keen on the fave to go back to back at Hastings.
Do we have a Triple Crown winner book? Did we?
No, we don't, and we probably will have unlikely to open one. I think all going well, Callsign Mav, who heads to the Cox Plate. This will be his last run at Hastings, unless he probably underperformed and wanted to stay here in NZ. But from all accounts, John Barry's pretty keen to take him to the Valley.
Jeez,
I think that just emphasises the fact that we should really be getting on Callsign Mav this Saturday.
Yeah, well, good point. I mean, if he's going to take on, we've got some unfinished business there, John Barry at Moonee Valley too, in a Cox Plate. So wouldn't that be something?